Today, we're going to crack open a historical mystery that's almost 2,000 years old. We're talking about one of the most famous, and let's be honest, one of the most confusing books ever written, the Book of Revelation. But we're not just asking what it means, we're asking when it was written. And you're about to see why shifting that date by just 25 years, well, it changes absolutely everything. All right, let's get into it. So, let's start with the obvious question. Does this really matter? I mean, who cares if it was written in 68 AD or 95 AD? Is that just a bit of historical trivia? The answer is a huge, emphatic yes. This isn't about acing a history quiz. This is about understanding the entire point of the book. And here's the point that just nails it. The date isn't some minor detail you can just nudge around. It's a load-bearing wall. You move that wall, and the entire structure of how we read the book, all the symbols, the prophecies, the warnings, the whole thing starts to wobble, and maybe it even comes crashing down. So, it really comes down to two main theories, a tale of two timelines. The first one, the early date theory, says Revelation was written before that world-changing event in 70 AD, when Jerusalem and its temple were completely destroyed. The other theory, the late date one, and honestly the more common one for a long time, puts it a whole generation later, around 95 AD. So where does the evidence actually point? Okay, so for our investigation, we're going to start by treating the book like its own star witness. Before we hear what other people said about it centuries later, let's just listen to Revelation itself. What clues does it give us about when and where it was written? The very first clue that just jumps off the page is the book's own sense of urgency. I mean, it is not shy about this. Revelation is practically screaming at its original readers that the stuff it's describing isn't for some far-flung future, but is right around the corner. Look at the words it uses right in the first chapter. It says, "These things must soon take place, and the time is near." Now, you have to ask yourself, if this book was written about events that are still thousands of years away from happening, what on earth did soon and near mean to the actual people reading it back then? But if it was written just before 70 AD, that language suddenly feels incredibly real and incredibly urgent. Okay, let's move on to our second clue, and folks, this is a big one. It's a huge architectural clue that feels like a photograph taken at a very specific moment in time. It's the description of the temple in Jerusalem. Right, so here's the key part. In chapter 11, the author John is literally told to get up and measure the temple, the altar, and get this, those who worship there. This is a picture of a living, breathing, functioning building, buzzing with activity, that is on the very brink of being trampled. It's not described as a pile of rocks that was wiped off the map 25 years ago. It's presented as something happening now, facing a threat that's about to hit. And this just seals the deal. Check out the language here. On the left, you have Jesus' prophecy in the Gospel of Luke, which pretty much everyone agrees is about the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. And on the right, you have Revelation 11. The language is identical. The holy city will be trampled by the Gentiles. It's not just similar, it's a direct echo. It strongly suggests they're talking about the exact same event. And it gets even more specific. The text gives a precise time frame, 42 months. Well, if you look at the history books, the final, most brutal phase of the Roman war against Judea, starting with the Roman general Vespasian's campaign in 67 AD and ending with the temple's destruction in August of 70 AD, that time frame lines up beautifully with this 42-month or 3.5-year window. That's not a fuzzy symbolic number, it's a specific number for a specific historical event. All right, time for our third and final piece of internal evidence, and you could call this the smoking gun. It's a riddle about 7 kings that seems to date the book with some pretty startling precision. Okay, let's break this down. In Revelation 17, John is told about 7 kings. The angel says, 5 have fallen,
One is, the other has not yet come. Now, if we use the common way of counting Roman emperors, starting with Julius Caesar, it lays out perfectly. 5 have fallen: Julius, Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, and Claudius, check. The one is, the emperor who's in power right now as the book is being written, that would be Nero, and the other has not yet come, that would be Galba, who, just as the prophecy says, only reigned for a little while, just a few months. This timeline puts the writing of this book squarely in Nero's reign, right before his death in June of 68 AD. So you look at all that, right? The language of the standing temple, the emperor count, the internal evidence seems like a slam dunk for a date before 70 AD. But here's the twist. For centuries, the most popular view has been the exact opposite. So let's take a look at the case for the other side. The entire case for a later date, around 95 AD, pretty much hangs on this one single sentence. It's from a famous early church father named Irenaeus. Writing over 100 years after the events, he said the vision was seen near the end of Emperor Domitian's reign. And for a lot of people, for a long, long time, that was it. Case closed. But good history isn't about just taking one person's word for it, right? We have to weigh all the evidence. So let's put this star witness Irenaeus on the stand for some cross-examination. You know, is it possible that this single line, which has been passed down for almost 2,000 years, isn't quite the slam dunk it's been made to be? Is there maybe another way to read it? And this is where it gets really interesting. The problem is hidden in the original Greek. The phrase that Irenaeus used can be translated in two completely different ways. It could mean "it was seen," referring to the vision of Revelation, or it could just as easily mean "he was seen," referring to the man, John, the author. If it's the second option, then all Irenaeus is saying that John was still alive during Domitian's reign. It doesn't date the book at all. That one tiny pronoun changes the entire meaning. And that really brings us to the heart of it. The statement from Irenaeus is absolutely a valuable piece of historical evidence. We have to consider it, but it's not a judge's gavel that slams down and ends the whole debate, especially when you have to weigh it against the mountain of evidence from inside the book. Okay, so we've looked at the clues, we've cross-examined the witness, but let's get back to that first question. Why does this 25-year gap actually matter? Not just for historians, but for anyone who wants to understand this incredible book. The implications are frankly huge. It changes Revelation from a book about some unknown, far-off future into a book about a very specific, earth-shattering event in the 1st century. If you take the early date, Revelation's entire genre shifts. It's not just a collection of weird symbols. It becomes a formal covenant lawsuit. Think of it, a dramatic court trial. The book uses all this legal language from the Old Testament to put the city of Jerusalem, the city where our Lord was crucified, on trial for breaking its covenant with God. The verdict is guilty, and the sentence is the coming destruction of 70 AD. So, in the end, this is the choice we're left with. Two totally different ways of seeing Revelation. If it was written late, then it becomes this kind of deferred codebook for the far future, and words like soon and near basically become meaningless for the people who first read them. But if it was written early, it becomes a 1st century thunderclap, an urgent, powerful, and deeply relevant message about a crisis that was unfolding right before their very eyes. You know, when a book tells you over and over that its message is for soon, and it describes a building that's still standing, and it counts Roman emperors in a way that lands you right in the 60s AD, maybe the radical and yet simplest way to read it is to just take it at its own word. Maybe the key to unlocking this whole mysterious book is to simply believe its own timestamps.